said the BRRRR model is dead. And the BRRRR model is not dead, but it temporarily is very difficult to complete because the takeout mortgages that you're getting are more difficult, like just lower loan to values because the rates are higher, so the debt servicing is not there. If you want to understand some of those terms I just said, we talk about it in depth on Patreon. But basically,
yeah, I just did a whole episode on the BRRRR model and broke it down. And one of the things you'll notice is on the small scale residential, especially, it is not that juicy. On a larger scale, it still can be, but the gap's closing, right?
Exactly. But on a basic scale, the income that a property generates is what they're using to qualify the mortgage that you're going to take out of that property. And now that mortgage is so much more costly. And yes, rents have gone up, but they haven't gone up proportionately. And so that mortgage you're able to take out is quite a bit smaller than what it used to be.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't necessarily completely nuke the value of your property. It just means you're leaving more equity in that property a lot of the time. It will degrade the value a little bit, but there's still a lot of equity being left behind that eventually sometime down the road you'll be able to get. So if you're not needing the money immediately or not like in that kind of crazy growth mode, it doesn't hurt to still do it. But if you are still trying to do that where you want to grow, we're talking about some options with new construction. Now, new construction's facing the same issue though, where people are struggling to take out all of the money that they spent on construction.
Oh yeah, they're having to leave a lot of money in or even put new money in.
Put new money in. But we wanted to just dive into it a little bit because there might be some options out there with financing options that CMHC offer to help you get there. And I think we've talked about this before, but the government's going to have to do something to help spur it. And I saw
100%.
Yesterday, a town here in Nova Scotia is offering basically giving out the land for free. Plus, they're offering to pave the roads to help you go in there and build subdivisions or build apartment buildings. And so they're starting to kick stuff in. So you're going to start to see that happen. So even if you can't get the money out, you might be able to get some stuff covered by the town or community that you're working in, plus get a CMHC loan that allows you to get 100% of your cost. So you'll get no lift, but 100% of your cost is covered.
I also think that there's a really good margin in the small scale stuff. Like 6 units and under, even up to 12 units. Yeah, house conversions, things like that. But we're talking new construction here. If you get the right lot and you can put up 4-6 units, I think you can do really, really well on those because you can build them for much cheaper. And, even though appraisals have pulled back a little bit, they're still pretty juicy. Yeah. So the small scale new construction is really interesting as well.
Yeah. So what we want to talk about today, again, is on a high level, just kind of what the process looks like, and then our overall kind of sentiment and takes on it. So the first thing we're going to kind of touch on is, obviously, everyone knows what a new build is. That's a ground up. There's no building there. It's not a renovation. You're starting from scratch, putting a foundation in the ground and building upwards. There's two kind of main types when you're looking at apartment buildings, and that would be wood frame construction and concrete construction. Pretty obvious. Wood frame, it's built from wood. Concrete, it's built from concrete. So the floors between everything is concrete. You do get a hybrid model that people do a lot, and that is where it's concrete on the main floor where the commercial spaces are, and then above that it's wood frame. The biggest limitation with wood frame is the height limits from building code. They've been up to 8 stories now. They're looking at doing mass timber that can go a lot higher than that. Concrete doesn't have a building height limit as far as I understand. Like steel concrete can go
the moon, baby.
To the moon, basically, as long as you have the engineering need and budget to get it done. And so that's where you see downtown, all the downtown cores in every city. It's all massive concrete steel buildings. And then as you go into the neighborhoods and you see those low-rise, mid-rise buildings that a lot of people live in, and they're the big, long buildings, those are all wood frame because it's a fair bit cheaper. Or it used to be a fair bit cheaper to build those. And so they do that, but they're limited on their height. Now, the first item in doing any new build is land. Getting the land, sourcing the land, figuring out if you can build. So how that kind of goes about is first, it depends. Like there's a million ways because you bought a piece of land for a very large development, I think, before you're in a position to do the development. Yeah. Like you're starting to look at it now, but you bought that land how long ago?
5 years ago, I would say.
Yeah, and
I stubbornly bought a giant piece of land just because I knew there was so much value there, and I was I couldn't find anything else. I'm like, I guess I'll buy this land, and I got a favorable take back from the lender and all this good stuff. And we've talked about this before. The land is so crucial because if you want to make a play on a development whereby you put as little as possible into it out of your pocket for cash, the easiest way to do that is to get a smoking deal on the land. So in that particular case, like I bought the land for I think $700,000. And then I ended up kind of having an appraisal for around $3.5 million. So, and that took time. That took a development agreement. That took 4 years of appreciation. It took all that sort of stuff, and I had to carry it and pay those soft costs. But with some pay down, and the amount I had to initially put in, I was virtually up $3 million just on the land. So then if you've got a project that maybe is $30 million for the whole build, you've already got 10% equity. Now that's an extreme example, but it stays true for land at all sizes. If you can find a real opportunistic buy on a house that's maybe $250,000 or $300,000, but it sits on a piece of dirt that could allow the construction of 20 units, all of a sudden, at 25 a door, that's a $500,000 piece of land, and so you've gotten that lift of a couple $100,000 just in the land play.
Exactly. What did you? And again, I know I've said this a bunch of times. We got a big sign sitting here, but we will dive really deeply into what that actually looks like in a Patreon. But what were you kind of basing on? Like when you looked at that piece of land, what enticed you to be like, this is because there was other pieces of land available that you could have bought. What were you looking at that was like, this is a real reason I think I'll be able to get something here? Because it wasn't directly zoned, like that piece of land when you went to go buy it. It wasn't zoned like, you can build.
It was zoned for a triplex. It was zoned for a triplex and some townhouses.
He bought a piece of land for $700,000 to build a triplex and some townhouses. And at that time, a triplex wouldn't have even been worth $700,000.
No, not at all. I understood in my local area kind of what the process was for development agreements, and that's something that you can do by talking to a qualified planner or just being engaged in your community development process, like going to some of these hearings, talking to people at the municipal level and finding out. I just knew that there was enough dirt there and it was on a main road that I could go through the development agreement process. And while you never quite know what that's going to yield, I had a pretty good idea. I also monitored other projects in the area and what they got for their massing. It's like, well, if that person can do this much over there, then I can do the same because my lot's effectively the same. So, and it was, neighboring some other property I had. I think we've talked about that before. It's in my own neighborhood. So I bought it for sentimental reasons. I bought it because I knew there was a play there. I maybe, bought it too early and built it or planned to build it too late. So I'm just kind of sitting on it right now. But that was the thought process.
Two things I want to mention. When he says there's enough dirt, he didn't mean physically enough dirt. He meant the square footage of the space. You'll probably actually have to bring some dirt in, won't you?
No, because there's actually a really nice grading to it. We'll carve some out. We'll probably have to take some out, but 2 stories of parking, right? So you got to take a little out. Yeah.
This guy in the parking garages.
I love me some parking.
So I'll comment on one that I bought. It was an acre of land, and it's got a duplex sitting on it, which was nice because it allowed me to finance based off the duplex. So I only had to put down 20%.
Huge. If it has an existing structure on there that can be financed, it makes your life way easier.
Yeah, and it's something that's going to basically carry the cost of ownership while I get the permit done on it. But what I was kind of alluding to when I asked when you were trying to make the decision, like with this one, same thing. It was zoned for a duplex.
Yep.
But I made the decision because around the corner, someone else had gotten approved an apartment building. And next door to me, there was commercial, and I had frontage on a main road. And so all of those things made me believe, even though right now it is zoned for a duplex, going to council and being like, look, like it's on a main road. I have commercial abutting 400 feet of my lot. I also have I see that you guys approved an apartment building right behind me with the original same piece of zoning that I had. So, by looking at all of those things, it kind of gave me some confidence to buy. So that was kind of something I wanted to just mention is like, it's not going to be as simple as like, boom, here's a lot. And you're like, oh, you just breed it. Oh yeah, it's good for 40 units. Sweet. I'm just going to buy that. Because if that's the case, it's going to be marked up as a piece of developable land, and it's going to have a very high cost associated with it.
Yeah, which is fine if you have deep pockets, but then you don't get the lift that I was mentioning off the top, where you want to have that equity in the land that then can count towards your equity component of your financing the whole project.
You'd be buying it at that $3.5 million value, right?
Exactly.
Because that's what it's worth then.
Yeah.
So now you've got the piece of land, and we've kind of already started talking about it a bit. You think something's going on there, but you need to go through the permitting process. You've gone further than I have. I have some in the works. I'm banging my head against the wall because it's a very slow process. It's not something that you can get, like, doesn't matter how crazy you go, at least in this local community, but you can't push it along too much faster than what their systems allow. Kind of what does that look like for you, and what I guess.
Yeah. So
level.
There's kind of two levels of it. Like there's a development agreement, which then allows you to build something on a specific piece of land, and different municipalities will have different equivalents of a development agreement. It's sort of like, well, there's what you can do as of right in that area because that's just what we've said. That land can be used for this purpose. A development agreement says, hey, there's enough of an argument here to do something different, so let's have a conversation/negotiation where we, me, the developer, and you, the city, agree on some unique ability to do something else on this property, and that results in a signed development agreement that goes on the title of the property that says you can build this on that property. And then permitting is, okay, you're allowed to do it. Now do it correctly and bring me all the technical side of it to start construction, the stuff you need to have signed off on by engineers and by all the utilities to actually then build the property. So, you go from, purchasing the land, doing basic massing of what you think you can get there. Then you apply to the city to say, hey, is it cool if I build this? And then you start going actually through the regulations and the code and the technical components of how to build it within the requirements of building code effectively.
Exactly. Just talk a little bit more about the as of right. That's like literally what is the lot is zoned for, and you can build per the rules that have been applied on that lot. So again, just to break that off. So sometimes you will find lots that as of right, you can find within sometimes these plan documents can be a little bit difficult to understand. You can see that you can build a fair bit of stuff. And now with locally our center plan, it allowed a lot of lots to be more easily understood as of right what you can do.
Yeah.
And so now you can say, okay, as of right, they don't say a unit count, but they'll give you dimensions of what you can build.
Height or gross floor area ratio.
Height, setbacks, close floor area ratio. And with that, you can determine, okay, I can build 40,000 square feet. And I know out of that, I'm going to get 80% utilization for units. And out of that, I'm going to build the units at an average of 700 square feet or something. And you can kind of quickly mass out what you're going to be able to build there. And then you can see, okay, wow, there's a lot of value in this, which is just a house.
Here's a funny way to explain the difference between as of right and a development agreement. So there was a highly contested development site in Dartmouth where as of right, the owner could do very minimal things. You could build a house, you could maybe build a duplex, you could do a couple things here and there. And one little thing, you could also build a hotel. But anyway, it's like, whoa, wait, what's that last part about being able to build a hotel there? That sort of stands out. But this was some antiquated old component of the bylaws for that particular area that says, as of right, you can build a hotel there. And of course, no one ever thought you'd build a big hotel in this location in Dartmouth. Maybe there would be like a strip motel or something like low rise.
When they put that zoning in, there was no density there to
exactly,
ever
there was no
service a hotel.
That you would ever have a hotel there. So years later, this developer's got the land. They're like, listen, I can build a hotel here. And I've got plans for a beautiful 12-story hotel. However, instead, I would like to just build an apartment building, and can you give me a 10-story apartment building? And so the latter, the application to build the apartment building instead, that went outside the as of right ability to build a house, build a triplex, or a hotel, had to go through the development application process, which was a negotiation with the municipality. And the neighbors were like, we don't want that apartment building here. And the city, very rightly, was noting like, I understand that, guys, but if he doesn't build the apartment building, he can just build this big hotel. And which would you rather in your neighborhood, the apartment building or the hotel? And the neighbors were like, he's never going to build that hotel. Let's call his bluff. And they fought him tooth and nail. And eventually the city got him down to, I think, an 8-story residential building.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, I'll just do an 8-story residential building. And still, some people in the neighborhood fought him. They took him to the utility review board, and it was a nightmare. And he says, you know what? The market's changed. The hotel industry is bumping.
Guess what's there
and he
now?
went and he pulled a permit for a hotel.
And guess what's there now?
Yeah. So as of right, he could do the hotel. He was trying to do a development application for something else. And he got obstacles, so he went with what he was able to do as of right. But that shows you the difference between what you can do as of right and then how an application would work.
On a side note, that's been the slowest construction project in the history of time.
It is taking a while.
Like 3 stories up. I don't know.
No, there are more stories, but it's still concrete skeleton. It's been paused at that for quite some time.
What they're doing. That's been a weird site with a lot of issues. But anyway, so now you own your land. You've gone through the permit process. You have figured out what you can build. You've gotten the city on board. Okay, you can build 50,000 square feet, 60 units. Now you actually want to build the thing. Time to do some budgeting and figure out what you can do and what that's going to look like, because it's going to be budgeting and financing. These are two steps, but they're kind of really one. And it's something you probably start even once you're through. Like the second you have a rough idea from the permitting process, you're gonna start this, because it's a big task to get the numbers dialed in, and then getting a bank on board. Because if you're no longer talking about, it's not just even the quantity of money. It's not necessarily because it's so much money. It's also the idea that they're getting involved in a very risky process. There's not anything there. Like if you default on a house, the bank doesn't want your house. But if you default on a framed up house, they really don't want
half completed project.
A half completed project.
Yeah.
So a lot of times there's multiple banks involved. There's a ton of insurance problems. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So for you on the budgeting side, you again also on these big projects, banks usually won't let you self-build. And you probably aren't in a position to if you haven't done it before. Like going through a self-build on a large building is very difficult.
Even on a small building, they're gonna be like, so wait, you're gonna build this 4-unit, this 6-unit? Like who are you?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I do it on the side. It's my side hustle, but I've got a great...
I have a sick IG handle that I renovate some houses.
Like they're going to want to see more than that. So they might force you to bring a contractor on either way. And they'll have price analysts, like cost analysts through the whole process. And this was the challenge with why I kind of, paused my development, is that one of the things they do, like this design phase, like once you have the approval, you still then have to go design the building, and then you kind of have to price it out, and you put your best estimates in. But we're in a marketplace where those estimates were getting out of date in 30 days, and the prices were just going up and up and up and up and up. So the cost to build it was ballooning like crazy. And then from a financing perspective, they build in a rate range. So they say, okay, it's going to take you 18 months to build this project. We know what the interest rate is now, but we don't know what the interest rate is going to be 18 months from now. So we'll build in you a nice juicy cushion of like 100 points, maybe even 150 points. Well, what's happened over the last 6 months? 300 points.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of projects became untenable. And in my case, it was actually sort of a blessing in disguise that I wasn't midway through this project when these rates went up. Because then they would come to me and say, yeah, you can keep building it, but we're going to need you to put more and more money in. And you might get to the end of the project and, rather than them being like, here's your nice juicy refinance for your end finished building, they'd be like, yeah, we'll do that, but you need to come up with extra money. So there's still risks associated to it that are not dissimilar to the BRRRR model. However, we're both of the mind that there's going to be some government intervention to allow housing starts to tick back up with some more improved programs. There's also, you're at least getting newer stock, and if you can fashion it in a way that your capital upfront, your investment is small relative from a loan to value perspective, like if you can get into it with 5 or 10% down, isn't that much more exciting to then have a nice finished brand new building as opposed to doing a BRRRR, flipping a single unit to maybe a duplex and getting like 15,000 of your $30,000 investment back? Like a new build is pretty exciting in a lot of ways.
So before we tap that off, a couple things I want to ask you about. Permitting costs. Mm-hmm. What did you face when you were talking about permitting costs? What kind of costs did you spend to get the permit, and then what were you paying on permit side?
Yeah, I mean, your biggest permit here locally is your water one, which I think I squeezed in just before they raised it from $1,800 to $3,000 per unit. And I was doing, that was for like a 50-odd, 60-unit building. So it's like $100,000 just to get my water permits.
Okay. What did you spend on like engineering, consultants, planners, and all that kind of crap to actually get to the point of getting approved?
Yeah, my total soft costs, I mean, probably with architects and engineers to date, plus a 6-month design consultation, probably $250,000.
You're including engineering in that, so like that's got your mechanical, HVAC, your plumbing, all that kind of crap engineered out, or is
yeah, and some of them went further down, but like the geotechnical, the environmental, all the stuff that goes into to analyze your site, your surveys, all of these things, and typically that's handled through either your architect or your contractor. They essentially go out and source all these sub trades. But yeah, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of soft costs.
Building permit?
We didn't pull a building permit, so I don't know. I couldn't speak to that, but we didn't get to that point.
But so you're probably about $350,000-$400,000 into this.
Yep.
Prior to having a building permit, prior to having a shovel in the ground.
Yeah, and that's a bigger project where it's, again, I think 60 units, or it's been a while since I checked. That's a large project, and that investment isn't lost. Like that has raised, and that all counted towards what would have been my down payment component, effectively. So it's still value there in it.
Soft costs can be financed in a new construction build.
Yeah, it counts towards the overall cost of the project. So if you're paying that out of pocket, you do get equity credit for that.
Exactly.
But it's still money out of pocket up front, right? That you're doing to try to get this project off the ground. And you're going to have that same situation if you're building something smaller. Like if you're building a 6-unit building, like it's amazing how people want to plan this project and then they turn their nose up at paying an architect like $20,000 or whatever. It's like, man, you need these people to do what they do. You have to budget that stuff in there. A planning consultation, surveying the lot, all of these things, they're kind of requirements. And if you're serious about it, you want to employ the right people to help the process go smoothly.
The tough part is on the small scale, some of these costs, like they don't go up at the same rate. Like to do a 60 unit, you might have spent $100,000 with an architect. To do a 6 unit, it could be, like you said, it could be $15,000-$20,000. So you're doing 10 times the size project, but you're only paying an extra 8 times or 5 times the cost. And so that's also why you want to do giant projects, but it's very hard to get to that scale. Like you have to work your way through the process.
Yeah.
So just understanding, if you're listening, that those prices that Chandler's mentioning are not necessarily scalable. Yes, the water permit, that would be, and building permits, like those things will scale, but some of your soft costs overall for engineering, architectural, and planners will not scale, unfortunately. But overall, how do you feel about the new construction outlook moving forward? How do you feel about your build? Like where you see things going?
Yeah, I mean, that's still the holy grail for me personally, and I'm going to get there, but I am probably going to first do, something out of wood in the interim, smaller scale, stacked townhouse sizing, just because I think right now, price-wise, that's easier. And then I do think long-term building and building out of concrete really is the long-term hold stuff. The wood frame is good, I think, for buying and maybe selling at some point. Mm-hmm. I'm optimistic, like I said, that there's going to be intervention from CMHC and the federal government to make the numbers work, because frankly the numbers don't work. And I've posted some videos about some uproar people had about the rental costs of some units on Agricola Street here in Halifax, how crazy, they couldn't believe how expensive these rents were. And then in breaking it down, it's like, that he's losing, or he or she, the landlord, is losing money on some of those rents and making it back on some of the others because the margins are that low at today's costs. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have a massive shortage of housing here if we don't change something really, really, really quickly.
What were you quoted per unit cost? Just a high level.
It's about $335.
$335. That's not including land or any of the soft costs.
No, that included the land and soft costs.
Okay, so your total was around $335 a door to get those buildings up. Have you quoted any wood frame buildings?
No, but there was a time where you were maybe 10% lower for wood because wood was so expensive, right?
Yeah.
So like it wasn't much difference, and you obviously just get a way better product with concrete, but a way slower build.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a bunch of trade-offs, and wood's coming back down a little bit. And there's some cool like overpour techniques with wood that are really good now too. So you may find that 10%, which is not insignificant on a big project, with like some steel like hybrid builds is a good way to look at it too.
Yeah. I was quoted on wood frame for a 100-unit building, and I think it was coming in around, without land and without the permitting costs, around $265 a door.
So there you go. There's your $300 a door, really.
And so once you're all in, it's $300 a door.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the values of the units were not $300 a door at the end.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah. It's like that building. They were like, we can build it and be $335, and there were $335.
This is exactly, and that's what I was facing. And exactly to what you said, we've done a few reels about it before, and we've broken down kind of the costs associated with building and actually carrying the building, and then what it looks like and what they need for rent to cover that cost. And a lot of people were like, well, we shouldn't be paying down your mortgage. So we did numbers where we removed the mortgage and we just include the depreciation, because when you live in a unit, you do ultimately wear out the cabinets, you wear out the floors, you wear out the appliances, you wear out the plumbing and all the things that go into it. And so just utilizing a standardized depreciation and adding that in with the interest costs of carrying the building and all the other insurance costs and everything on top of that. And we still found that these rents need to be $1,700-$1,800.
Well, here's some back of the napkin math, and this is what I posted in my video. So just say for really easy numbers, it was actually only $300,000 per unit, and if you did conventional financing at the end with the current environment that we're in, we're talking 75% loan to value. Obviously, these other programs have longer AMs, and you can get less money in, but in exchange for the longer AM, your payment actually doesn't change as much as you might think. You just have to put in less money out of pocket. So say you just did the rough numbers of a 75% loan to value. That means you're actually borrowing $225K per unit. So the mortgage per unit is $225,000, which at commercial interest rates right now, it's 6.5%, which would be a pretty good commercial interest rate right now, is just over $1,500 a month just on the mortgage. How psycho is that? Okay. But now you have to pay property tax, and property tax on that unit is going to be about $250. So now you're at $1,750 per month just to break even on that property. Now you have to insure it, which is probably $75 per unit, so you're at $1,825. Most places are going to have at least water included, so now you're at $1,850. Some places will include heat. That's pretty common in new construction, but they're easy to heat, so you're probably up around $1,900. And then you have to clean the common areas. You have to hire staff to work the buildings. You have to do plowing. You have to do shoveling, and you might actually want to make a profit at the end of the day. So maybe we call that $2,100, which means to break even on that property right now would be $2,100 a unit. So when you see a unit that you think is ridiculous because it's a bachelor unit and $1,700, realize they're actually probably losing $400 per month on that unit based on a per unit cost. And then the other ones that are $2,700, maybe for 2-bedroom plus den, they're making $600 on that. And that's kind of their window there. It is razor thin. People don't like to hear it, but that's the truth of it. So if you're wondering why the rent's so damn high, there you go.
The big thing I want to explain is, yes, I mean, the listeners get it, but in that mortgage payment, yes, we're paying on principal, which is what everyone bitches about, but he's not including depreciation. So if you look at depreciation, 4% of that $300,000, that's $12,000, that's $1,000 a month. So if you take out the principal payment, which is $1,000 from that mortgage, and you make it depreciation, it works out to kind of be the same thing. And so realistically, like Chandler mentioned, that's what you need. You need $2,000 a month from a lot of these units to be able to make it work. But before we end, we have to end on a more positive note, because I've had a few people come at me.
But the appreciation too and the pay down, it's like, how do I get that?
Which, sorry?
Like, how do you get it? Like, they're saying, oh, we're paying for your pay down, your principal investments. Like, yeah, that's net worth. But if I get it, like, how do I get that? I have to sell it, and then I'm taxed at it anyway.
Yeah, you're right? Losing on a monthly basis, which you need to operate and run the business. And when you do pull it out, you have to then renovate the building, which costs a ton of money, and fix a bunch of things. So, no, I get that.
Yeah. When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.